want to extend greetings to everyone in Jesus' wonderful name and to join you in returning to the Lord thanks and praise and to just honoring him for he has been so good. And he continues to show his compassion, his mercy, his unfailing, and his love towards us is so undeserving, but we are just here day by day, receiving the abundance of his goodness. And as David said in Psalm, 116 or 112, he said, I think he said, what shall I render? 160, what shall I render to the Lord for all of his benefits towards me? And he's not asking for, he's just asking, in fact, for reasonable service. And so we must bring to him the offering and the raise the altar of thanksgiving. It says that I will just take up the cup of salvation and I will call upon the name of the Lord. I want to join in the theme this morning that says pressing toward the mark. And brethren, really, when you really examine the words of Paul, it is really not just a casual statement, but this is a statement of deep purpose. This is a statement of deep, motivation. It is not passive, just not laid back, but this is very conscious in his action. And we must interpret the words and the encouragement. And Paul said that he presses. I press toward the mark. And if we ought to adopt the same attitude as Paul in pressing, forgetting the things that are behind, he notices, he says that in order to, in moving forward, he is addressing all of the issues of distraction. He is addressing all of the issues of former, desires, any former remembrance and old desires that would have once restricted him, or those old desires that would have bound him to this place. He says, he is forgetting those things that are behind. So, I am saying, brethren, that this statement and this whole declaration here, it is very, very purposeful. And we will just examine, because he says, first, he says he conked, and that must be the first principle by which we would press forward. We cannot press forward. You go back in the book of Genesis, is it Genesis 18 or with Lot's wife? One of the things that kept her in Sodom was that she did not count all but lost. And the first is a very sobering principle for us as a people to move forward in God and to press forward. Then nothing must be bound in. Our mind cannot be anchored in this world. We have to set our minds, set our affections, and Colossians 3 tells us on things above and not on things of this world. So that's an important, and many today is part of the restraint, or is part of the challenges that can be upon us, is that we are desiring the the things of God. We are desiring the promises and the kingdom, but yet our mind is bound, to this life. We are chained here mentally, and we are just overcharged, as Jesus says that we should not be with the soffitings and with the drunkenness and with the cares of this life. So Paul's statement was evidently one of separation. And he says, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind. And he says, and reaching forth. And so, it is not a simultaneous action. It is one of separation first. And when separation is accomplished, then he says, reaching forth. Notice he says I forgetting those things which are behind and then reaching forth. So we must separate ourselves. Part of the challenge that that many would struggle with is seeking both worlds and trying to attain the best of both worlds at the same time. They are seeking to attain the best of this life. And, both of the desires, and hear this out, both of those desires comes with its own share of sacrifice. And we can't get away from that. I mean, if we would want the best of this world, then something has to give, something has to sacrifice. And, if we would want the best of the things of God, then something has to give, something has to sacrifice as well. And if we desire, notice the people who are desiring the best of this world, then they sacrifice a lot. They do not have the time to engage and to fellowship. They do not have the time to truly, seek after God. I mean, this is a relationship. This is a covenant. This is a commitment. And one thing that we do know in relationships, in that commitment, then time matters. We must find time by which we able to share and to share that intimacy with God. We need time by which we can have that sweet togetherness, that sweet fellowship. And we cannot at no time claim that we are doing true service and we at the same time do not have the time by which we can devote. That's just all in the mind. That's just all having a thought, but not having now the true fulfillment of that. And time matters. So the the world today, it is hostile. It is hostile against the life of God, and we know that. The demands of this world, it is hostile against the principles, and it is hostile against that whole, urgent, because that's what pressing is. Pressing is a word that denotes urgency. It is really about uh, uh, hastening to advance. We have to hasten to advance. We need, there is a cause. We are advancing a cause. And so we have to ensure that this is priority. That takes the spot of number one. And we are not turning back. So Paul says, he says there, reaching forth to the things which are before. What are the things that are before? You know, the scripture says, anything that is, anything that is from above, then that's the things that are before us. In other words, the things behind it represents the temporal. The things that are behind us, it is representing the temporal. Going back to some of the Exodus, the children of Israel leaving Egypt and heading to the promised land. Um, Lot and his family leaving Sodom. All of those things are representing those things that are behind represents the things that keeps us in bondage. So he says to the children of Israel, the Lord says, come out of the house of bondage. That's making reference to Egypt. Sodom was it was a city of bondage. So separation was what God required and what was demanded of God in order to advance this cause for the kingdom and for the things of God. And here Paul says, reaching forth unto the things which are before, the things that is ahead. And the things before us, brethren, it is of greater priority. The things before us, it carries deep value spiritually. All of these things that are here upon earth, it fades with time. It fades with time. It's here now, but it will not be long till the elements that is here that's seeming to be carrying all of those value and all of the elements here that is seemingly so much of a treasure. Give it time and all of it would be. And it is in that context that Paul, he says, he count everything. He count everything but loss in the higher verses of the same Philippians. You see, he count it like dung. He count everything. And that's the kind of mindset, brethren, that we must have. We must be ready. How ready are we to let go of everything that is, if it threatens the eternal, if it threatens the eternal, then how ready are we to let it go and to say, man, I would count everything but loss just for the excellency of Christ. In fact, now that's the mindset that we must have now. The kind of thinking that we must have now is that we must hold nothing above the excellency of Christ. Nothing. Our career has its purpose, but do not hold it as anything that is preeminent to the excellency of Christ. It is not superior. Whatsoever reward that we receive out of those opportunities, it has its purpose, but it is not superior. You see, the point here is that never at no time should we hold those things superior to the excellency of Christ. So second place is not the position for one that is destined to eternal life. That's priority. And that's why Paul says, forgetting those things which are behind. And we ought to be ready. We ought to be at a place where we are having that mind of readiness that if needs be, that we can let go of everything and anything that sits in the way. And you go back to the apostolic life. When Jesus called the apostles into the ministry, that was what he was looking for. Jesus was looking for the man who possessed the readiness to let go, the man who is prepared to leave this world behind. And as he was calling them, he was meeting them at the various assignments, and he was calling them. He was calling. And those who were fit was those who immediately responded. They responded by dropping whatever they were engaging, and they moved with him. And he did not, notice Jesus, when you read the scriptures, there was no time there for any contempt. Jesus is saying that, whatever he is bringing forward is of priority, it is of urgency, and this must be a matter that ought to be advanced. And in our minds, that kind of advancement and that kind of thought must be settled in our mind. And I think the battle today is between two opinions often, and it's the same battle. You go back in Joshua 24:14, it speaks about the whole in between. And Jesus even spoke about it in the church, the Revelation 3, addressing the Laodicean church, where he also speaks of the whole hot or the lukewarm condition. All of these things, it represents in between. You are seeking to play on both sides, and those kind of that kind of approach is clearly detrimental, and it is fruitless. It cannot really bring the results. So we have our yea ought to be yea, and our nay must be nay. So we ought to stand for what he has called us to stand for. And we do that, by sacrificing everything and anything that will be a hindrance towards the cause of salvation. And how good we are able to do that will determine how able we're able to press forward and to march on to the whole agenda of the kingdom. Now, well, in verse 14, it says, "For I press toward the mark." So the mark is the goal, is the target. There must be a motivation that really urges us toward the mark. So that's the target. We have a target. We have a goal. We have there is a aim, and the aim is that Egypt will not be the place that would set us in bondage. People today have a lot of different goals in life, and many times those goals are all about just temporary attainment. The things that are visible, the things that are temporary, the temporal things, the goals, and our whole life has been cultivated towards that kind of thinking. That from very early, children who are going about, from very early they start putting in as to what must be your career, what is it that you would want to do, what is it that you would want to become, and things like that. And they are cultured to kind of work towards that. That's not bad in its sense, but we cannot do those things in the absence of also declaring what the true and what the real essence of the purpose of life is. And I think that's where the challenge really is. Yes, we occupy, we do what we're called to do while we are here, but we cannot do those things in isolation. We cannot do, and that's what you're happening. What's happening today is that people their focus is in one direction, or is in just a single path, and there has absolutely no appreciation for the deeper things and for the things that is of more eternal value and essence. So here we are at a place where we must now teach our children. It is not just about becoming this or becoming that, and then that consumes your whole life. It takes away all, and then at the end of the day, then your soul is in peril. Your soul, your eternal salvation is in jeopardy. And I want to tell you something that you would see that, when you look at the philosophy of this world, which the Bible says that we ought to beware of those philosophy that would spoil you. And some of the philosophies of the world, it gives that kind of it at the end, whenever the things, the goals that are being set are achieved, it gives that sense of accomplishment. So like everything is accomplished and you don't need nothing. And if one would die, without Christ, it seems like those earthly accomplishments, it seems like those things suffices. And it seems like those things, are, used yet as it really satisfies. It satisfies, the life. But that's just all a deceit from the enemy. Satan is a real. I mean, there are many different wiles of the enemy. That's one of them. He he sort of make a man believe that his temporary or his earthly attainment satisfies and it suffices for everything else. So once you attain what you desire to attain, then that's it. It's suffice. But that's a lie. In fact, the whole satisfaction, and that's where we're looking at. That's what we have been examining. We have to first to live a life that satisfies and that is complete in is that the things that will pass, the temporary thing has to be seen as dung. He says, the temporary thing, whether it is in the form of knowledge, whether it is form we mentioned it before. Paul says the excellency of Christ must be superior. So I would so we have to go, we have to continue to press. And the team says pressing forward. It says we have to go on to perfection. It's Hebrews 6 that says, leaving there are some formal things and there are some basic things. So it is about going on to perfection. It's about pressing. We have a goal and we go in. So every day in this pilgrimage, every day we move higher. We move higher on the treader of Jacob's ladder. We go up a treader. So we are looking for higher. We are looking to go to on higher plane. We just sing the song, a higher plane than I have found. Plant my feet on higher ground, because we know what it is to be in the low ground. There are too much of, it is susceptible to many things, even from the natural. So we always seeking high, and that's what the life of God is about. It is about attaining higher. It's about attaining greater, and Hebrews tells us that leaving the principle of the doctrine of Christ, let us go on to perfection. So we have to move forward. We have to press on. We're looking for, where we started is good. We started at a good place, but after a few years, after a period, and I am just using years in a very, using the word years, they're very loose, not necessarily in terms of time, but after a season, I say after a season, then we must see advancement. And that's important. After a season, we see advancement. That's what the life of Christ is. The life of Christ is deep, and there must be evidence of the working of God in the life of the saint. The saint's life must be evidently uh, declaring the workings of God. So we move from stage to stage. And again, that's another thing. I mean, we can be kept in bondage in many different ways, or we can be restrained in many different ways, or we kept in a place where we stay at a position sometimes for 10, 15 years. And it's not that there is no more it, there is no more available position. So it's not that there is no more to attain. Let me just say it like that. Not that there is no more to attain, but is that, you know, God, the principle that is of the spiritual, they are precise principles. I mean, we would not just advance automatic. No, nobody would get, there would be no automatic passes in the realm of the spirit. You know, those are very, very blunt principles. We have to grow, and we have to move on, and we have to we have to move to the point where we are, you know, advancing. And then when you advance, you know, we are taken from stage to stage, levels to levels. And that's what it is about. Now, in closing, um, I just want to submit one scripture in 2 Timothy 3 and verse 2. And again, in the context of 2 Timothy 3 and 2, for here again exhorted that, you know, as citizens of and as soldiers for Christ, it says, thou therefore, verse number 3, I am in verse 3 in 2 Timothy 2. It says, thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. So, and it says, no man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who have chosen him to be a soldier. So the first thing here is that therefore endure hardness. And we're talking about, you know, pressing toward, you know, and once we make a mention of that whole urgency and the whole hastening to advance a cause, then we have to set our mind in such a place that there will be resistance, there will be a lot of pulling back, there will be struggles, there will be battles, it would be harsh, it would be hostile sometimes, it would be fierce battles, because, you know, we have an adversary and he is working, he wants defeat, he wants, you know, he wants us to succumb to all of the different wiles. So, you know, from the moment you hear the word pressing, that should frame part of our psyche, that this is really about battlefield. And so it would not be it would not be the place for the weak and the faint-hearted, but it is for a good soldier. It says enduring hardness as a good soldier, because, you know, what it would take, man, it would take a lot of us at the end to really advance and to make it. So may the Lord help us and may He give us grace as we go through this day and for the week that is ahead. May He continue to sustain and to keep us in His peace. I thank you.